Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this week's Node-RED development Twitch stream. I've been trying to figure out what we're going to cover this week, and I don't know, is my honest answer. Haven't quite figured out what to do. We haven't got any, there's a few issues lurking. They're all fairly involved things, and none jumped out as being good candidates to try and get sorted in the hour we're going to be together this evening. But we'll find something. And so if you're watching on the live stream, on the chat, do say hi. Hi, Marisha. Good to see you joining. If there's anything in particular you guys would like to see me talk about, hear me talk about, see me walk through, then please do jump into the chat. I'm kind of a bit of a loose end this evening, but hopefully keep it interesting, hopefully do something productive. Let's see what's going on in the world, or at least in the world of Node-RED. Following on from last week, if you were watching last week, we spent a bit of time working on a new feature around how we manage importing duplicate nodes into your workspace. So if you import a flow which has a subflow in it or a config node that you already have, give you some more options. Well, that moved on a bit after the live stream, to the point where I actually got a pull request in middle of last week, end of last week, which I merged earlier today. Not to go over it, but just for completion, if you were following me last week, this is all in the dev branch now, so you can play with it yourselves. If you import nodes you already have, you get this notification. Let's get that bigger so you can see. So hitting import copy will be the existing behavior. So you'll get a copy of all the regular nodes, and if we determine any subflow definitions or config nodes or ones you already have, we won't import copies of those. So that's existing behavior. And then if you hit view nodes, you get this dialog. Now this looks slightly different, I think, to how I had it on the live stream last week. But the principle's the same. It shows you a list of everything that's going to get imported. You tick what you actually want to get imported. And I think where I had struggled getting the UI right was it felt like there were three options that you either wanted to import something that you don't have, import a copy, or to replace what's already there. And it just ended up in being too many tick boxes, too much sort of cognitive load on the user. So simplified it down to nodes. You don't get any option. We're always going to import a copy of the flow nodes, because for 99% of cases that's the right answer. But with the subflow, if you tick it, there's now just this one. If you just tick it, you'll get a copy. If you want to import it and then replace the existing one, you have to tick this extra option to replace. And that all works. Miraculously, it all works with the undo logic working, so you can undo importing a subflow, and it's really quite neat. So here's a little animated GIF, which may or may not come across. You tick the subflow box, you tick replace, and when you hit import selected, in my testing, I had a subflow that changes its color when you import its new definition. That didn't come across in the animated GIF. Anyway, that's where that feature ended up. I'm quite pleased with that. That should address some real usability issues around, particularly when you're collaborating and you want to share subflows and provide fixes to subflows. Otherwise, what's been going on this week? Fixed a few issues, merged a few other bits. really we're just trying to get things into shape for the 1.2 release. Did some interesting stuff around the JSON expression editor and in fact the syntax highlighting. Interesting issue where here's an example JSON expression. Again, if I zoom, and you can see the syntax highlighting's got a bit funky. It's all gone red down here. You can see up the top here a multi-line comment, which is a comparatively new feature in JSON. So new line comment, but you can see as we scroll over, here's a maths expression and it's misinterpreting that divide as the start of something. And you see all that red text carries on until the next divide symbol there. And the theory in the issue was it was misinterpreting that as a comment, whereas in fact our syntax highlighting didn't have any support for comments whatsoever, and actually the syntax highlighting I'd cobbled together was fairly naive, and it was actually treating that entire block as a regular expression as far as the highlighting goes, as well as this initial comment up here is treating as a regular expression. Anyway, long story short, I spent some time, because this is all using the ACE edit component that we use, spent some time looking at how their JavaScript syntax highlighter works, and how it deals with telling the difference between the start of a regular expression and a divide symbol, and indeed the start of a multi-line comment. And earlier today I managed to push a fix that gets the syntax highlighting looking like this now. The comment is now light grey, as a comment should be. It's not misinterpreted the regular expression. I've got some other tests that show it still correctly identifies regular expressions when they are in the right place. And there were some other fixes going on. It was, for example, in this example code, there's a variable called $sum_cases, and actually $sum is also the name of a built-in function. And our syntax highlighting was spotting that and highlighting $sum there as if it was a built-in function. Whereas, obviously it isn't. So again, figured out how to fix that. I think there's some more improvements we can make on the syntax highlighting. It just looks a lot of dull text. That's been fixed. What else has been going on? Various other little fixes. It sort of gets to that point where I go through a little run of doing fixes and then I lose track of what I've actually done. But I mentioned we're building up to the 1.2 release. So in GitHub we have the 1.2 milestone. Now this is a list of stuff that I've sort of thrown on this list as things we'd like to try and tackle, or at least resolve. Tackling does not mean we will fix it. It might mean we decide there's nothing to do, but we invest some time to try and move forward. So there's still a lot on here. There's no compelling reason for it all to go into 1.2. In fact, I suspect now majority of this won't go into 1.2. But this is kind of, as I've tried to prioritise the backlog, stuff to try and pick up and at least move forward. So there's one in particular I thought I might jump into, because it's a bit of an older one and we ought to have tidied it up a while ago, is this issue, issue number 2020. So this is a problem with the audit log. So in Node-RED, let's just get into just get my local code up to date. Ooh, what's going on? What's happening? Why have I got... Oh, because I've merged something. Sorry, I just... Complete panic. I was thinking I was all up to date, but then I forgot. I merged some pull requests on GitHub, so I'm not up to date. Whew, that was a mild panic moment. So, what am I doing? Audit log. So if we edit a Node-RED settings file, and I jump all the way down to the... let's make this big so you can see. There we are. If we jump all the way down to the logging section, I'm going to set the level back to info because I don't want some of the other noise. But we have this option to turn on the audit logging. So audit log events are events like whenever someone accesses the HTTP admin API, whenever they log in, log out, all those sorts of things. Tasks that if you were wanting to do some sort of security monitoring of the runtime, for example, or access logging, you can use the audit log. So if I just load up the editor, you can see by loading up, just refreshing the editor, we start getting audit log events, and the audit log event gives you standard format of the event, level. What's level? Oh, I think, forget level. Levels, like log leveling. Not sure that's even useful. Anyway, moving on. The event that the HTTP path the request was for, and the IP address and timestamp. So you can see I've loaded the list of nodes, I've loaded the list of icons, got all the node configs, and then a comms open, so a WebSocket's connected, and then something's done a flows get, so some loaded up the flows. So that's all good. Now, if we kill off Node-RED, and this time I'm going to, go find admin auth, and just enable a default username and password. And now when I run, oh, come on. Right. So now when we reload, it prompts me, as it should. Essentially, we haven't had an audit log entry at that point in time, but I'm not going to worry about that. If we log in, admin password, because it's quick and easy, but Chrome keeps telling me off for using a dummy password. You can now see actually we've had quite a few more audit events. So we've had an auth login event, username admin, it's the Node-RED editor client that's done the login, yada yada, a whole bunch of other stuff. And you can also see, as well as the comms open, which is the WebSocket connection, a comms auth event, because we authenticate that one separately. And then all the other audit events now also have the user making the request. Yeah. So, I've just lost my OBS window, so I can't see what you can see. There we are. I can see you again. So that's nice. That's what the audit log's for. And now let's. So the important thing for the issue we're about to dig into is, no, I've got an IP address in lots of these, all of these events. We don't actually in the WebSocket comms one, but again, I'm not going to get distracted by that because that's not the issue we're investigating. But if you look up here, the auth login, it's been a login event, but there is no IP address. So it's told me that the admin user has successfully logged in, but it doesn't give me their IP address. And if I log myself out, so again, you can see the auth login revoke, which has the IP address and the WebSocket comms closure. If I try logging in with a duff password, okay, login failed. And here's the audit event. So auth login fail on credentials, username admin, but note there is no IP address. Now the problem with that is if there are standard sysadmin tools that can be used to help provide additional security to temporarily block IP addresses if they are doing things they shouldn't. So if someone tries to start hammering, trying to guess a login, then there are tools called, fail to ban, I think is the tool. Yeah, fail to ban, which can be set up to block IP addresses if they do things they shouldn't. But because our login fail audit event doesn't have the IP address, you can't connect the two together. Now to mitigate that slightly, if I go and try logging in incorrectly repeatedly, and one password could just go away, but I can't remember how many times I need to do this. I think it's a few more times. So there we go. Now if we look back, in fact it's been doing it for a while. Note the so let's just look through. So there was the initial login fail, and then you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. It gave me 4 more attempts to log in. So that's 4 more times it's taken the password I've provided and tried to verify it against the real password. After that, we get too many attempts, basically. So Node-RED has got built into it protection that if there are too many failed login attempts for a given username from, and I can't remember if we use IP address to help key it, but either way, we have built-in protection, which is certainly some mitigation to using external tools. But again, the fact remains, in all of these audit events, there's no IP address. We simply don't know. We don't know who has driven those events to happen, and that's the issue. How can we get the IP address included in this audit event? And believe me, if it was as simple as just adding the extra field when we call up the audit event, I wouldn't be wasting your time talking about it because that would be a one-line change. In actual fact, it's a bit more involved. So let's see how far we can get. But so we're in the source tree. If you've not seen it, or if this is the first time, hey Alex, good to see you join us. So if this is the first time you are joining us, so the Node-RED source code, we have it set up as a mono repo, so we've got multiple npm modules that make up Node-RED in the one repository. That's why we've got this slightly curious structure. If you're not familiar, we've got packages, node modules, and then the source code for our modules. The reason we have this node modules directory is it allows any of the code in these lower modules, say, if we go into @node-red, runtime, lib, guessing at it now, but yeah. So here we are in the @node-red runtime npm module, and it does a require of @node-red registry, which is a separate npm module. But obviously that's a pain it's not a pain, because all the code is in the same repository. By having that require in this file in this place, Node will work its way up the directory tree until it hits this node modules directory, and then it will look for can it resolve @node-red registry from there, which it can. And here is @node-red registry. So that's why we've got a node modules level in our source hierarchy, because that little trick that lets us structure the source code so that we have the multiple modules in the source code, and they are able to require each other without us having to manipulate paths as part of publishing the final modules. It is a bit of a pain for some tools that are built to ignore node modules, because typically you don't have source code under node modules, but there are various tips. If you're interested in learning more, do ask another time. I've done I think there's a talk of me on YouTube doing from the London Node user group earlier this year, last year, who knows, but it's on my blog. Anyway, I digress. So we have all these modules. The one we care about is the one dealing with authentication of the HTTP API. So that's @node-red editor API. So in here, this is essentially the Express web app that serves up the editor, sets up all the paths for the editor, and then knows how to plumb the requests to those paths into the core of Node-RED, into the actual runtime libraries. So what are we looking for? We are looking for the authentication handling, and that comes under auth. Just bear with me whilst I go and find... Well, in fact, what we're looking for is the audit events. So you can see, apart from those guys, we have got quite a few places in here where we call log. I don't know if you can see. Let's make this all a bit bigger. Should we hide min map? See how quickly I get lost, but it'll give you a bit more of the screen to see what's going on. There we are. Yeah, so we're in the auth module, which has the main login. So this is the function that's called when someone is requesting to log in, and we've got the different ways you can log in, whether it's via credentials or OAuth strategy or whatever it might be. We come through, and what we're interested about are the audit events. So here you can see log.audit. Oh, now this is interesting. Come on, there must be more. There must be more. So that's auditing the revoke. So that's effectively the logout audit event. Here we've got the login event. Right, yes, okay. Permission fail, revoke. There must be more. There must be more. Let's dig in deeper. Strategies. Okay, again, we can see lots of log.audit. And note how we're just logging the bare minimum, the event, the type of audit event. So invalid client. Yeah, so so here's that login protection. Here we are, password token exchange. So this is the code that gets called when we're looking up, is this password valid for this username? This is our code that deals with the how many attempts you're allowed to fail within a certain time period. And we only allow 5 failed attempts. And again, you can see we do the log.audit and we pass in the event, the username and what client they were using. But we don't include the IP address, and there's reasons for this. Down here is where we get the login fails, whether it's based on permissions or credentials, and again we log the audit event, but we don't have the IP address anywhere near the log statement. So we want to add in the IP address. Now, this is where it gets complicated, and this is where whether I'm able to fix this in the next half hour, because it isn't a simple change. And that's because we use the Passport framework for doing authentication, which is a standard Node.js library which has support for all sorts of different authentication schemes. But the key point is, at this point in time, in this function, this password token exchange, it gets passed in the client, which is who's making the request, the username, password they're provided, what scope, what permissions they're looking for, and a callback when we're finished. There is no IP address. Passport just doesn't doesn't expose the IP address through to this function. I'm just going to password token exchange. Let's just have a quick look to see where that is used. So, yeah. So again, this is all sort of boilerplate Passport code. I'm not going to step through it all, but it's deep in the bowels of Passport how these functions get called. So it's not really credible for us to extend the function signature to get the IP address passed in. That's just not going to be possible. So what can we do? Well, at the moment, we if there's an error, then we call done with false as the second argument. Now, again, because we're in the bout, again, this is where we might fall apart, but rather than log the audit event at this point in time, it would be better to throw an error or create an error that gets percolated up the system that can be caught higher up in the chain, back nearer the point where we're handling the original request, and from there we should have the IP address of the person making the request in order to log that error and do the audit log. So I, at this point, have no idea where that's going to arrive in the code, which is an interesting thought. So I'm just going to create a new error object at this point. And just login failed. And we are going to audit, and we're just going to give it an audit object. No, we're not. Yes, we are. Maybe. We're just going to record all the information that we were going to pass to the audit event. So it's actually on the error object. So if we can get the error object percolating up, then we'll be able to reuse this audit object having attached the IP address to it. And then what I'm pretty certain is it would be pretty standard to, rather than pass null as the first argument, to pass an error object. So save that. Let's wait for Node-RED to restart. And then, like I say, I can honestly say I don't know what this is going to do. Okay, login failed. And that hasn't turned up anywhere, which is curious. In fact, we've had an internal server error, error 500 on auth token. Okay. Now I was kind of hoping that this error would pop up somewhere. In fact, I'm just going to, if we just did a constant log, just to be absolutely certain we are hitting the right spot. So give it a duff password. Yeah, login failed error. Okay, so we're doing it. The question is, what? Where's this ending up? So this is the password token exchange. We followed that back up. The password token exchange gets handed into the server. Then what do we do with that server? Right, let's see. We have this error handler, and I can't remember where that error handler gets invoked. See, this is why I wasn't entirely sure about tackling this issue, because again, there's some gnarly code here which I don't know as well as other bits. So, look at that. So I added, where are we? So we've got to this point, because you can see now we've got this extra, we've had the stack. So what we can say at this point is, let's say if audit, then we are going to log, how do we log an audit event? How were we doing it before? Yeah. Not Audi, that would be audit. You know how when you read a word too often it stops making sense? Well, that's just happened with the word audit. Okay, so now we're saying if the error that gets passed to this error handler has an audit event, we'll log it. Right, so now let's see what happens. So duff password, let's go look at our log. And you can see we've once again got the audit event. Awesome. But the key thing is we've now logged it from somewhere completely different. And why is that important? Well, it's important because we've got this the request object available to us. So we can say audit equals rec dot something. And I say something because can you remember how you get the IP address? Let's go look at someone who will know how we do this. There must be an audit event in here. No. Why aren't there audit events in there? Come on, we saw them all in the log. There must be somewhere. Right, search in folder. Are you kidding? No, I searched in the wrong place. Here we go. So here are all the logging of audit events. What? Oh, yes, of course. So log.audit takes the second argument, which is the HTTP request, like that. Okay, so we've moved where we do the audit event to a point where we're able to provide the original request. That now means if we've got it, get it running again. Come on, there we go, it's running again. Then do a login fail, go check the log, and there we go. So we've not only have we had the audit event from a different location, we now have a bunch of standard information that the code knows how to pull out of the original HTTP request, like the IP, the path, the user making the request, and so on. Awesome. So the principle we have is just trying to think. Because there is a something else we're going to have to deal with in a moment, but let's do one thing at a time. Where's my change? Right. So rather than at this point log the failure and then call done with a false, we are generating an error object and passing it up. But, and for completeness, let's just use the... So we can duplicate that code for all the other places where we do a log.audit pretty much in this function at the very least. And that will be good. Except, for example, here in the success case, we won't have the IP address. Because at the moment we're looking at how do we attach the IP address for when things fail, and we can do that through the error handler. So one problem to tackle, although it's another problem to tackle is how can we get the IP address into the audit event in the success path where we can't throw up to the error handler. But we've also got this issue that because we're now throwing an error, we are taking just a different path, different code path. And what the editor sees is now different. So I'm just going to restore the code. Okay, so this is back to the original code. Go on, restart. And this time we're going to switch to the network tab. Let's clear this up. So, right, now if I do failed login, can you make out there we get a 403 status code? All right, so properly HTTP proper response code, we're getting a forbidden 403 error. If I make the change, so we throw the error instead, and started, and then now when I try logging in, so we've got the 403, let's try a second attempt. This time, we've got the 500 internal server error. So it's a different error code, which is bad. That needs to be 403 as well, because we need to be consistent in our status. Arithmetic, we need to take into account the X forwarded for header, absolutely. So again, that is that it comes up later on in the X forwarded for yes, that is something to do. But the key thing is, hopefully, because the log.audit function, you can just pass in the request as its second argument. That means there's just one place to update to take into account those extra headers. So if nothing else, we can take a look at that, or we'll address that. But we can fix that in one place and solve it for everyone. Right. So how can we get back to doing a 403 on this code path? See, at this point, I feel the need to just go and... So I can't remember if that 403 is us, as in custom Node-RED code, or if that's the standard. Yeah, as I feared. The 403 is coming out of the heart of the Passport framework. Which, yeah, I don't really want to add extra code to deal with this special case. What can we do? And I don't really want to start stepping through all of their code to try and figure out what it's doing. Not least because my... excuse me. Yeah, let's just think about how we can tackle this. What we need to do is have a little think about authorize. Now, I don't know how much of this is just like a thin veneer on on other modules. I mean, I've dug into this before. So we have forbidden error. Now that's interesting. What if we did... I wonder if it cares about this dot status. Where were we? We were down here. So we create the error, and we're going to give this an e.status of 403. Let's have a look. Now, if we go back to Node-RED. Have I gone off the edge of the screen? Right, now if we try logging in with a bad password. Ooh, can you see? Can you see what we've got? No, because I can't zoom in. Oh, come on, Chrome. Oh, that's useless. Anyway, it's done the 403. So setting the status code on that error has done the right thing. Cool. So is this a case of now... so certainly for the error cases, I think we can now do the right thing as far as the audit log goes. Where are we? We can use let so we can do this properly. So here's the other fail. So we're going to, for now, just copy all of that. And change it. Permissions. Yep. Where else? So that's this log.audit is the success case of the successful login, and I don't have an answer for how we tie into that yet. And then we're gonna do the same trick for the too many login attempts. copy and paste. No, I didn't. Credentials, permissions. Too many attempts. Have I got username, client? Don't need scope for this one. 403. Yeah. What's the difference in bytes about? Can you explain what you mean by that? The difference in bytes? Where are we looking? So just check. So admin, we're just going to do 3 quick so note, if you can make it out, they're all coming through as 403s. And if I go look at the log, here I've had too many attempts and it's got the IP address. And then up here, the regular fails with the IP address. Oh, right. The network token had 2 differing 403 responses. I see what you mean. If we actually look at the actual payload is I see what you're saying now. So the payload, we pass back a JSON server error, and then with the error description, auth login fail credentials. Okay, so this is going to be a change. Let me for the login fail. I didn't think of this, so we've sorted out the status code, but the actual payload of the response as well. No, what was it? Null, false. Okay, so just changing this back to the old behavior. We're still going to get a 403, but 403, and if we have a look at its contents, you get an invalid grant, invalid resource owner credentials, which, to be honest, is kind of a, well, it's the right error because we've failed to, because it's no auth flow. Is it no auth flow? Yeah, but it is an error coming out of the internals of Passport. And again, whilst we've got this fixed the status, this is a concern. Let's do, if I do too many attempts again, so number 6, one for luck. If we look at the server error, auth login failed, too many attempts. Oh, because I didn't. Oh, that's right, because before I had a message in there, too many attempts, please try again in yada yada. I feel, this is at a API level. I don't feel bad about that, but I am slightly concerned about changing the payload of this response. It's one thing to get the 403 right, but if the error or the error description changes, then that's an API change because people will have depended on it. Okay, so at this point, where did we get to? So we've got this invalid grant, invalid resource owner credentials. Now, that may be a pretty duff message, but let's go look at auth the module we use and just see, can we find if that message actually comes? Yeah. So actually this function, issued function, is the one we are calling when we call done here. So the first argument, null, the second argument is expected to be the access token. So you can see here, if the access if we pass an error, then it passes on the error, which is all well and good. If it's an access token, then it creates a new token error with a type invalid grant and invalid resource owner credentials as its payload, as its message. Just go and have a look. And then from that, it sets its own status code to invalid grant is a 403. Now, yeah, so we kind of need to stick to this behavior and think about, okay, how can we get invalid grant rather than just the server error? Was it was it server error? Yes. Okay. So next question is, where does that server underscore error come from, and is it something we can override meaningfully? There we are. There's lots of them. But it uses this .code. Does it use? No, it uses the code that gets passed in. So where do we create these OAuth 2 errors? And again, this is deep in the bowels of someone else's code. But sometimes you just have to figure out what is going on. So where do we actually create? I think it's going to be the fact it calls the variable code means I'm going to try if we say invalid grant, and this is one of the reasons I was nervous was this fix. If we just wanted to jump in and get the IP address in there, it would have been easy to do at the expense of breaking backwards compatibility or doing something that changes some subtle aspect about what we return. And as this is, mustn't call done twice, excuse me. As this is, these are APIs, these are externals, these are meant to be rock solid. I don't have an issue adding extra fields to the audit log, but we couldn't possibly think about taking anything away. Let's try that. So we've had the 403 token, and it's come up invalid grant, and okay, we've changed the description, but I don't feel so bad changing the freeform text description, particularly when we're changing it to something that's more structured, if you like. But that's good. So we've managed to restore the correct status code. We've managed to restore the right error code. We have changed the error description, but that feels I'm less sure, less concerned by that. And what we can do is, well, that's an interesting point. Is 403 the right one for too many? Bad request. Yeah, access denied, 403. Yeah, we're going to go with that. Interestingly, whether temporarily unavailable would be a better response for too many login attempts. That's out of interest. Too many login attempts, HTTP response code. What is the wisdom of the internet? 429. Well, there we are. 429. That's exactly what we want. Too many requests. Oh no, that's all the wrong code. So we want 429 for too many attempts. Let's have a look. What's this? HTTP cat. Too many requests. Oh, where's that opening up? There we are. Yep. Too many requests from HTTP cat. That does it. So where are we at? Okay, so we've now managed to attach the IP address to the audit event for too many attempts for invalid permissions and invalid credentials. I think that's all good. Where else? Oops. Where else do we audit in this file? So we've got the success case, which I still need to think about. Here we've got invalid token. Where's this bearer strategy? Okay, so this is someone is trying to log in, but they have got a duff token, which I think we can simulate. Okay, let's try stick a console.log. Here we are. Oh, it's 9 o'clock already. Right, gonna tidy these ones up and then take a run through of what we've done and just to have a little think, is this even the right approach to be taking? It feels like we're in the right direction. Okay, so what I'm doing here is here's another place where we're doing some auditing and we're not including the request because we don't have access to it. And this is where they've already logged in, or they claim to have logged in, and they are providing an access token and we're validating it. And if it's not a valid token. So I've just stuck a console.log just to confirm, because if we're going to test it, I want to make sure what I think will test it is actually worthwhile. So if you saw, I put in access token as a query parameter, and there you go. You can see here we are. In fact, it's come up twice, which is kind of makes sense. Yeah. So that's good. That means we know how to hit this piece of code. So if I go and get, actually, I think someone said it, didn't you? We could use const, couldn't we? I'm still, I don't instinctively know when to use, I mean, const, to me, const, like in the Java world, it just feels like you don't use it willy-nilly in just a variable in your code. It's like constants you define, and they are, yeah, anyway, I know what I mean. But, so where were we? We were here. Okay, so same pattern. We are going to log the event, but this time it's an auth invalid token. That's going to be a 403, did we say? Yep. Where are we? 403 e.code. Ooh, I don't know what code to give that. But we can go check. So what code did we get? Did we really get a 401? No. Oh, where's the option? Preserve log, that's what we want. So we're going to clear this log. We are going to hit up access control 1, 2, 3, 4 again. Okay, and then because that's done okay, is there any auth errors? Oh, don't do that. Response, what? Close that table. Cancelled, 304, 304, 401. You know, I'd expected one of those to be the error. Then we come straight onto the 401. Oh, I'm just going to stick in invalid token. Is Node-RED getting a login screen? Node-RED has had a login screen for a very long time. So, just as it's an important topic, if you go to node-red.org, go to the user guide, and in here there's a section on securing Node-RED, and it's got how you set up access control to your Node-RED editor with either username and password, but it's also possible to plug in OAuth, so you can log in with Twitter, you can log in with GitHub. We have example plugins, or you can write your own code to do it all. Yeah, so that's quite nice, and then each user can have a different set of permissions, so you can have users with full read-write access, and you can also have users with read-only access, which is handy if you want to demo something to someone but you don't want them to be able to deploy anything, and a whole range of things in between. So where were we? So we're doing invalid token event, invalid token. At this point I don't think we know anything else about the user. Okay, let's see what happens here. We're going to throw back a 403 invalid token. Let's check Node-RED is started. And then, what are we doing? We're doing the access control one, aren't we? Okay. Oh, now that's curious. It hasn't... I think I've broken things by changing it to 403, you know. I think there's some code looking for the 401. And in fact, we've not had any audit logs come up. I've broken it, is what I've done. Okay, so there's something different about this point in time in the code. And there's me thinking this would be a quick win. So let's just to double check we are really hitting this piece of code. Oh, come on. Right, I'm gonna make that strangely smaller, and then we can see the log poking at the bottom. Oh, that's better. We can see what's going on now. Right, let's just load up the page as normal. Now let's fire in with an access token. Okay. Now that has sort of worked, but sort of not worked. And I can't see in the Chrome log which of the requests is the one that's... In theory it's this one, but it says it's cancelled, and I can't for the life of me think what... You know, I would be expecting in here somewhere it to... There, 401 gets a 401 unauthorized to access the user because we're not logged in because we have a duff access token. And then if we swap that out for leave our here, if we swap that for what we had done elsewhere, which is and out of interest, if we change that to 401, is that the magic? Ooh, that's not what we want. Okay, that's weird. So we must be in an entirely different code path now, because even though we got the here being printed out to the log, but we didn't get the audit event, so this isn't passing up. Right. Okay. This needs more considered digging than I can do whilst I'm trying to talk through it and keep you all entertained on this Monday evening. So I'm going to, before we do, just what else we've got? So we've got the bearer strategy, which is someone's already passing us a token. Is it good or not? We've still got client password strategy. Someone is trying to log in and we don't recognize the client they're logging in with because I think that was a concept that's been added but we don't make use of. Then the audits we've changed. The audit when you're successful. So that's it for the audits that we need to do. So next steps will be, I need to figure out the error handling for the bearer strategy and why that isn't filtering back up through the error the path, the other cases. And that's just going to be some dull stepping through passport code to try and work out how it all hangs together. And then the one that it's this one, which is the success. How we log success at a point in time where we have access to the request handler. Again, I think I'm going to have to just step through the passport code and work out where's the entry point in the passport code that I can hook into. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there, but some questions in the chat. Is there anything being developed for the merge view? Something really cool, but obviously a pipe dream I imagine will be a merge view for flows where you see the two states of nodes right next to each other, or even overlaid so you can see it in one go. So there's nothing specific planned for the merge view. The merge view we have got, does its best at trying to give a meaningful view of the world. And it does show you where things have changed by sticking them next to each other. Have we started? Yeah. Okay. Let's just... I will say this is another change that I got working the other day, is we've updated the very latest version of this ACE edit component, which now has support for the latest versions of JavaScript syntax. So we now have support for like the spread operator and all that goodness, whereas before you'd get lots of errors in the syntax, in the code, or errors in the dialogue, even though it was perfectly valid syntax. So so if we just change something there quickly, deploy and then go look at my other one, view changes. Yeah, so at the moment we do show side-by-side diffs of nodes that have changed. I think there is work to be done to try and make it a bit more accessible. For example, having an option to hide all the unchanged stuff, so it only shows you stuff that has changed. If you've got a huge workspace, the bigger the workspace, then the less manageable it would be if there's only a couple things in that list that have changed. There's also a question about having a standalone diff tool that you can give it to JSON files and it can present this sort of contextual diff between those two files. Because one of the hard things that this diff view has to deal with is it's actually doing a three-way diff. Because if I hold on, got to get this sequence right. Right, I'm going to move that inject node and this function node. I'm going to edit. Meanwhile, over on this guy, I'm going to also edit this function node. And I'm going to deploy this one. We go back in here. And now we have some merge conflicts because both sides have edited the same stuff. So here you can see locally I have changed, compared with what was on the server, it shows me I've changed this inject node and both sides have edited this function node, and you have to pick which of those do you want to keep when you merge in the remote changes. Now, so that means this diff view is actually, as I say, doing a three-way diff, because it has to work out what changes have I got in my local workspace that I've made since I loaded things, and then what has the remote side changed based on the same thing, and then where are there the conflicts. And oh man, this was like 3 or 4 months of headaches of getting the logic behind this diff tool right. But I think there is certainly a need for a standalone diff tool that can just does a straightforward. So effectively would just give you, I mean, it'd still give you the 2 columns, but it would highlight the differences between those two. Now, when I say a standalone tool, what does that mean? Given Node-RED is a web app effectively in the browser, I don't really know what form that diff tool would take. But it would be nice to have something in that space. How much we could reuse of the code that's behind this diff tool, obviously we'd try and reuse it all, but again, getting interesting questions about packaging of code for the editor and for some independent standalone tool. But yeah, I think the diff view, it needs work, but it kind of needs feedback, really. It needs feedback from users as to what can we improve. I'm also quite aware it doesn't give you a diff of sort of the visual look of your flows. It's contextual diff of the JSON and the nodes, but it doesn't. Whilst if you've changed the wiring, it will tell you the wires arrays have changed. It doesn't give me the 2 pictures, the images of the flows side by side. I mean, that's another whole other standalone project I'd like to create. Is given a flow JSON, give me back the PNG of that flow. And I've tried quite a few times to do image export from the editor, and I can get 95% of the way there, but you lose all the node icons because we can't embed them. I can't really. Was it node icons? I've got so close, yet it's far enough away. It's missing a critical piece that it hasn't seen the light of day yet. But So really, I mean, the main thing is just getting feedback on this, whether it's the diff tool, other ideas. But otherwise, made a bit of progress on this issue around getting the IP address into the audit events, and being useful for me because it has helped dig up how some of this works, where some of the logic is, and indeed set me off down a rabbit hole of trying to find out where some of this authentication flow goes anyway. So that's going to be useful. In terms of 1.2, just trying to get a feel for when we're actually going to do a release. I mean, our release plan says end of September is when we target it, so that's why it's very much active in my mind about when we get it done. I would like to try and get the initial beta. Get the initial beta of 1.2 maybe later this week, maybe early next week, and that will have the new import code in, as in importing subflows and updating subflows and all that good stuff. It will have the runtime hooks for the pluggable message routing that I covered in a few videos earlier in the summer. But whilst it's going to be in there, and I know there'll be some of you out there who'll be keen to jump straight in and start exploiting them, it's going to be released, but we still want to try and edge our way forwards with them. We need to find the right words to put around it, but basically they're there for people to experiment with. But I think still a slight experimental feature until it stabilizes a bit down the line. The other biggie will be support for npm modules that contain subflows, as in creating a node from a subflow and publishing that to npm. Again, that's very much going to be in experimental mode and not one that we push heavily as a headline for the release. I think it will be a sort of developer preview, because there's still some outstanding questions that we kind of need feedback on about the formats of various bits that, if we change, are going to be not backward compatible changes and how we structure a few bits and pieces. So again, whilst the code may be in the 1.2 release, again, we're going to have to find the right words. It might be we put a feature flag in the settings file just to be clear that you've kind of got to opt into this behavior, or opt into the support for loading up subflows from npm modules. And other stuff. I'm sure there's just general currency of updates like the new ACE version, which again doesn't have lots of bells and whistles, but support for latest JavaScript syntax is actually quite neat, as that's getting just people getting more accustomed to using it. Otherwise, there's a full roster on the milestone. Lots of issues to dig into, try and make some progress on. Just hope we can chip away at more of this in terms of the release of the 1.2 release. Because after 1.2, then we'd look at doing 1.3 in January. And after that, it'll be 2.0 in April. Now, there is an open question: do we do 2.0 soon in order to resolve the bcrypt npm audit warning? But because that's going to require us to drop Node 8 support, so we're still chewing over whether to bring the 2.0 release much sooner in order to resolve the bcrypt dependency. So the jury's still out on that. I don't know. It all just makes more work for us, to be honest. Trying to work out what the right thing is. So, well, thanks for joining, everyone. If this is your first time watching, thank you for joining. I hope that was interesting. I hope a bit of a tour of how the auth handling's done in the admin API is of interest. I will be here, all things being equal, next Monday, same time, same place. But if you've got any questions, if there's anything you'd be interested in hearing more about, seeing more of, any feature requests, ideas, whatever it might be, then please do jump into Slack, on the forum, however you want to do it. And no problem about sidetracking in the chat. Basically often I'm just talking aloud to try and keep it entertaining. If you guys have got questions to ask, please do, whether it's on topic or off topic, and we can do our best to be interesting and be helpful. So there we go. Right, time to go have a cup of tea. Thank you for joining, guys, and until next week, I'll see you soon. Bye.